it's very hard to have a nuanced debate. And I think art is that space still, where you can like feel what it's like to be different. You can feel like contradictions and really live through them. And you can do that in a safe space. And I think that's very hopeful now that we still have that space. So I believe in art and that side of art, that we can bring people together, can understand the other.
Welcome to Locarno Meets, a movie podcast brought to you by UBS from the Locarno Film Festival. Eskil Vogt is the screenwriter and director best known for The Worst Person in the World and The Innocents. He joined us to discuss his new collaboration with Joachim Trier, Sentimental Value. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I saw Sentimental Value yesterday. I'm not the first person to say this, but it's really, really, really good. And what I really liked about it is it's an optimistic film, I think, and in some ways sort of a screenwriter's fantasy, because it sort of features a screenplay that's so good that it's able to heal some rifts between people. Is that something you kind of dream of when you're writing?
Well, it's also about, someone pointed out, how hard it is to get someone to read your script, because that's also a through line in the movie. But just read it, just read the thing, and no one does until the end. But it's, of course, I mean, when me and Joachim, we've written all his films together, and when we start out, we wanted to make something about family, and this thing with cinema wasn't part of it. It was about sisters, it was about a father figure, and then we just figured out that, there's so much, especially in a family setting where there's so much history and so much that's not said. It's very hard to communicate in a very straight way about the important things. So we find indirect ways of communicating. And in this film, that's also like the metaphor for that is maybe the screenplay, the writing, the film that the father is making.
Yeah, there's a bit where Stellan Skarsgård talks about we need to have a proper talk. And they never do have the proper talk, him and his daughter. But they do end up connecting, and that seems to be through art. And I wonder if you feel like it's the job of an artist in a perhaps increasingly disconnected world to help bring people together or point out what we have in common.
I think art can be so many things, which is what's great about art. And it could be a kick in the face. It could have no redeeming value whatsoever. It could be just what it is, art's for art's sake. But I think art is very good at that. We live in kind of tough times where everything's very polarized. And if you say something, people will say the opposite. And it's very hard to have a nuanced debate. And I think art is that space still, where you can like feel what it's like to be different. You can feel like contradictions and really live through them. And you can do that in a safe space. And I think that's very hopeful now that we still have that space. So I believe in art and that side of art, that we can bring people together, can understand the other.
Even if you're setting out to write something nuanced, as you say, is it still quite hard as a writer to resist writing that big dramatic scene, the confrontation scene that many films would have in it, the proper talk?
Well, it's I think it's with Joachim and I something we've been building towards, that we always kind of avoided straight drama. It was something like, no, that's not us. We're going to find indirect ways, cinematic ways. We're going to have passive protagonists who don't do brave stuff I always think that the big lie of storytelling sometimes is the way characters change completely within the arc of a film, and we don't believe in that. We don't believe in that big conflict, then it's resolved and everything's fine. People kind of stay the way they were, but we kind of been building towards that feeling that there is something in that, people sitting down having talks, and the way that can, if not change people, at least change your perspective on them. You can get to know people better, and then something will have changed, not the person but the relationship, and we're getting braver and braver pushing towards those kind of more classic theatrical confrontation scenes, but we still have, I think, a healthy kind of resistance of not like jumping straight into that.
One of the things I really like about the film is that it's about multiple family generations, but there aren't any kind of rote culture wars or like generation wars. It feels very much like these people are similar. And I think that quite often people want to paint, I don't know, I guess boomers as one thing and millennials as another. Was it a conscious decision to try and write like that, or is that just what comes naturally?
Well, when we started, we were thinking we're going to have more fun with that. And then when you start writing, you're not writing a generation, you know, you're not writing a gender, you're writing that person with that particular psychology and background. And so everything becomes more and more specific and less of a, like a, I don't know, like a zeitgeist joke. So of course, when we're working, we just get rid of more and more of that kind of generalizations and getting more into the nitty-gritty of that specific character and trying to make a rounded three-dimensional portrait of someone.
I was very appreciative of the fact that it felt like you left a lot of jokes on the floor, right? I mean, there could be so many jokes about generation gap, or especially about bringing in a Hollywood actress, with the possible exception of one Netflix joke.
How can we leave that? Yeah.
But is that, I mean, on a very basic level, do you sit there laughing and writing funny things and then say, no, that's too much, and delete it?
Yeah, it's kind of a painful part of the writing. I mean, I think the first draft was much funnier and the second draft was more serious, which is often the way it works when I'm working with Joachim, is that we kind of, it's funny, but would he really say that? And go, no, he wouldn't. Take that out. And then trying to get to the so-called truth of the character, which means what creates something that feels like a real person who would actually do and say that. And of course, the Elle Fanning character, the Hollywood actress, would be so easy to make a character out of her, and the conflict between them, like the superficial versus the profound. But I don't find that real either, and not very interesting. It would be interesting if she has the same kind of drive. She wants to make good films, and she has a lot of the same values as the others, and that makes for hopefully something more complex and interesting.
What is the writing process with you and Joachim?
Well, it's been the same for a while now. We've been writing together since we were in our teens, made short films, and then graduated to features. And this is the sixth feature film we've written together. And it's just us, like, closing the door on the world, getting some time together, sitting there talking. And we don't know what the next film is going to be, but after a few months we know, and then we start working it out, and it's very intimate, very private. It's like I have a couch in my office, and Joachim often lies on it, and we're like, this is not working. This is therapy, you know. or we play music while we write, and we talk about films we've seen and books and our friends and us and our problems and whatever, and then suddenly something will come out of that, and so it's people who say our film seems kind of personal. I think it's because of that way of working. It's impossible for us not to put our obsessions and what we're thinking about at the moment into the film, because we don't begin with a pitch of like a seductive story. We begin with just us talking and digging and finding something within ourselves and what we want out of cinema.
Does that tend to manifest itself at its beginning as a theme or a character or a narrative?
We kind of attack it from all sides, so we can have like this very formal idea of like, it would be great to have a contrast to the drama, to have something that spans generations or even more, and like, what could that be? And then later we'll say, maybe it's the family house, you know, maybe that can be that thing that puts everything in the context and makes like the human life seem as short as it is, which is interesting when you are in a drama where everything seems so important and you need that bird's eye perspective suddenly. And so that was an idea, to have that contrast, but we didn't know what it was. And then we wanted to make something about sister dynamics, because we've observed that a lot and we found that very interesting. And then just all these things come together. And Joachim also brought into the writing room in the beginning, it would be nice to work with Renate Reinsve again.
Sure.
So that was something that also they were thinking, oh, she should be one of the sisters. And so everything kind of, everything kind of evolves organically. And it's often when 2 or 3 things that we thought were very separate click together, that's when we say, we have a movie here. This is what we should be pursuing.
And does the production go in with a fully locked script, or do you work with the actors as well to develop characters?
We always kind of try to keep it loose, and often even the casting we could do some rewrites on, on some scenes, or I like to watch tapes of the rehearsals and rewrite some of the dialogue. Sometimes just to get an idea, we get an idea of this character is bringing this, more interesting to make the scene a little bit more like that, or just they're struggling with that line, maybe that line is a problem, and then you change it. It's those kind of things, and that kind of spirit that Joachim also brings onto the set. That it's a collaborative thing to make a film. So the script is hopefully a very good proposition of what the film should be, and then it keeps evolving. If you have that locked idea, at least Joachim feels he doesn't get what he wants out of the actors and out of the process.
The house is incredibly central. At what point did you decide that was going to become, I guess, not just the staging post for most of the storytelling, but I guess the object of sentimental value?
Well, it's often such a cliche when people say like the house is a character in the film or whatever, but I feel it's true.
To be fair, voiceover almost literally says that as the film starts.
But we wanted it. We wanted that in this film, and it was about what I talked about earlier, that it was about the perspective on like the drama we're in now, and understanding that maybe what we're dealing with, it can also be traced back generations, the way that things kind of trauma in a family kind of is transmitted in very insidious ways through generations. So that was part of it. And then we thought, wouldn't it be great? Because Joachim and I, like the thing about just doing plain theatrical drama is not enough for us. We always want to have some sort of formal concept, something cinematic, something that's not about the cause effect of just a plot. And we thought the house would be such a great way of doing that, giving more thematic perspective and making something beautiful and hopefully a little original, and have that as a through line through the film. And it turned out to create a lot of possibilities. Suddenly, like the windows in the house becomes like the eyes, so you can film through it, and you have the feeling that the house is watching, and you have that. And it's also about time, because film is always about time, and it's about the perspective of something that will live much longer than a human life. Time feels different, that's why we wanted in the beginning kind of a child's perspective on that house to introduce all these things, and then hopefully it gives you kind of pause and also think, human life is so short, so why bear all these grudges? Why can't we just like accept each other with all our flaws and meet each other with some tenderness and understanding and forgiveness sometimes?
But the house has I think it has a complex position inside the film. I mean, as you say, it's introduced through a child's eye view where the house is really personified. And I think that's how the audience feels about the house. When you cut to the scene of them stripping the house, there was a gasp in my screening yesterday. But then it's the stripping back of the house that allows the family to come together and unite. And it reminded me of Worst Person in the World, talking, you have a character there talking about how he collected art to a point where he was no longer enjoying the art. It just became objects. And I wondered if those two ideas are connected, that actually we project too much on objects and places and not enough on people.
Yeah, that's the sentimental value, I guess, of an object. And I think we kind of, what we also discuss in the film is the idea of a home. And is a home a place, or is a home like a more of a state of mind of feeling belonging? And so that's, I guess, what the ending is about, in a way, that maybe the home isn't the physical home, but it's what it represents in this family.
I mean, it's also a film about, oh God, the brevity of human life. And there's a killer line in it for anyone kind of closing in on middle age as I am, whereas 15 years ago I was 55.
Well, yeah, really I identify with these things as well. Yeah.
Is it something that kind of that crosses both of your minds as creators? You know, you have this character, and I guess doing some basic maths, I'd say that character is 70, but he seems to be considered to be beyond his best. Do you feel like you're running on a timeline?
Well, it's at least we have that perspective now. I mean, not long ago, it felt like the future was open-ended. You know, there was just so much time to do whatever. And of course, when you get a little bit older, you understand, no, time passes really, really quickly. And also, of course, the film business is super ageist. It's very hard for directors to work in a very, until they retirement or continue. And especially in Norway, I don't know, but so of course it's something that you think about. You think about how many films do I have left, and how long will they let me keep on doing this? And so you have that perspective much more now than before. And I think, you know, there's so much bad things about middle age and about approaching old age. But what's good about it is that since you are in the middle, you can easily project yourself into being 73. And you can also remember very well how it was to be young. So I feel it's a very good place to be as a writer, because I feel I understand a much larger variety of characters now than I did when I was young.
You talk about trauma and how it can be passed through generations, but I feel like that's something which is actually has been really embraced by genre cinema over the last kind of decade or so. But what you seem to also say is that the positives flow through those generations as well. That perhaps the cure is inside the disease.
Well, it's true, and it's, I think, but it's also what you transmit to your kids. It's a mixed bag, and it's what you think you're transmitting, and it's what you're actually transmitting, and I don't know, you know, I think it's unavoidable. You do your best, and you send along like a very mixed bag of of everything, and you pass it on to the next generation. But but I think it's also good to know that, you know, trauma is kind of the rock you throw in the water, and the ripples spread out, and it spread out like much further than you think, but in the end it will die down. You know. And I think that's in Norway we still have the trauma of the Second World War as like very far back now, and maybe the generation of my kids and Joachim kids, they will be the first who are not marked by that at all, which is also reconciliatory, I think, that idea.
I can't remember if it's quite the opening scene or it's just after the opening scene, but a killer bit of the theatre, right? Which, speaking of The Shining, uses the same music. But was it always in your mind that you're like, right, we want to bang in with something really exciting, funny, stressful, and loud?
Well, that's fun, right? I mean, we like those contrasts, like to have really contemplative, voiceover-driven, poetic sequence, and then suddenly you're in some drama. And this is angst-driven family in a way. So we want to get right into that and pose the question: why is Renate Reinsve's character so driven to do something that she obviously feels uncomfortable with. She has stage fright to a point you wouldn't believe. And talking to actors, it's not that uncommon. It's weird, but I still want to do it. We want to go straight into that kind of question, because that's what we want to figure out with her during the whole film.
And what was behind the decision to have voiceover in the film?
Well, it's we like voiceover, so it came to us quite early that we want to continue working with that. It gives us a lot of freedom as filmmakers, and people criticize voiceover as it's kind of can be a very easy way of just lazy way of describing the characters' feelings and thoughts, and we never really use it in that way. We try to use it in other ways, and Joachim really likes when we write voiceover and those kind of sequences with a lot of images and voiceover. He feels it liberates him as a visual filmmaker, because paradoxically you have the voiceover doing a lot of the musical linking things together, giving information, and he can just be purely visual with his images and not feel obligated to tell stories all the time, to point at things, which you often do when you're filming.
You had a big success as a director with The Innocents. That's a film that does what very few films do, which is, rather than making a film about how adults see children, try and make a film about how children are. I can really think Spike Jonze's Where the Wild Things Are does something similar, and Petite Maman maybe. But it's clearly very, very difficult to get inside the ear of a kid. How did you do that?
Well, it came from having kids myself and just being.
I've got a kid. I can't do that.
No, but the seed of the idea was just having children, and I was never very nostalgic about my childhood. I just want to. When I was 10, I wanted to be a teenager. When I was a teenager, I wanted to be an adult. I want to leave that all behind. And then suddenly I had kids, and then I became curious about that age again. And I could see my son doing something, and that would trigger a memory of my own childhood, and I get this glimpse of what it was
like. It's like a time machine, right?
Yeah, I get this moment childhood opens up for you, and it closes immediately, because it's such a radically different way of experiencing stuff. You're so open, you feel stuff so intensely, and I just I want to go in there. I want to try to go inside that feeling and make a film about that parallel universe that kids live in. So that was the ambition of it, and I'm glad you felt that I succeeded in some of that.
I mean, with that, it's, as I say, it's a very difficult task, but there is the core of some fundamental memory inside you. When you're writing about people towards the end of their life, you kind of have to imagine it. Or are you having conversations with, I don't know, people in your family or in your life who may be older than you to try and get it?
It's a mix of that, but I think my method, and I think the obligation of any artist, is to start with yourself.
Sure.
And start with your imagination and try to project yourself into other situations and other characters. But I think it will be much truer and more interesting if you begin with you and your personality and put that in there. And then, of course, you're inspired by talking to other people and you do research and correct stuff. But I feel, the great thing about creating is to use your fantasy, use your imagination. If not, you're just representing other people's stories.
Did you and Joachim feel a sense of pressure after the success of Worst Person in the World?
Yes. And that's that's a big part of our writing process, is that we go into my office, close the door, and then we just try to empty out all of those expectations and all the smart career moves things, and just get all that out there, so we can just start doing what we usually do and find an idea that we care about enough to want to make it, because it's such a big, hard job to make a movie, especially for the director. You have to live with that project for, I mean, at least 3 years, maybe more if you're lucky enough to do festivals and go out there and sell it and present it to the world. And it has to be something that you really, really care about. So of course, so the paradox is you kind of rid yourself of all those expectations and all those voices in your head that's not coming from you, and then you write something saying, we don't care about anyone thinks, and then you make it, and then you care very much about what everyone thinks, and you want everyone to love it. So it's weird, but I think that's very important.
Did that anxiety find a home in the actor and the director who are having crises about their career?
Well, I mean, we didn't discuss that, but of course that should be maybe that's part of it. The fact that we make the movie about creative people in that way this time. Yeah, maybe it's about those kind of questions that we were posing ourselves after Worst Person in the World.
Well, as I said, I think it's a real masterpiece. So well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.